I never imagined that one day I'd be here to share with you a near-death experience that radically changed my life. My name is Sara Taylor. I'm 52 years old, and until a few months ago, I believed I had total control over my destiny. I've always been a successful businesswoman, married to a millionaire entrepreneur, a mother of 2 beautiful daughters, and influential in circles where few can enter. Everything I achieved came from my effort, or at least that's what I told myself. My family came from humble beginnings. I grew up in a home where money was tight and every penny was valued. But from an early age, I promised myself that I wouldn't live in that reality forever. I worked hard, studied even harder, and step by step, built a life that many could only dream of. However, this journey of overcoming also brought something I didn't realize: an almost suffocating pride, an unshakable belief that I was solely responsible for everything I had. God, for me, he had no place in the equation. I thought faith was a crutch for the weak. Now, looking back, I realize how wrong I was. Before I continue, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt so in control of your life that you believed you didn't need anything or anyone besides yourself? If so, let me know in the comments. It was a common morning, but with a touch of anxiety. I was about to undergo cosmetic surgery. It wasn't my first. After so many years maintaining a flawless appearance, I started to see time as my enemy. Deep down, I was afraid of losing my place in the perfect world I had created. That surgery would be just another on the list, a touch-up here, a smoothing there. After all, in a world that values image so much, aging seemed unacceptable. The day began with the strong smell of antiseptic and the metallic sound of instruments in the surgical center. The medical team smiled and reassured me, but I didn't care. I trusted only one thing: the money that paid for the best professionals. As the anesthesia began to take effect, I felt my body relax, my mind fade, and then something completely unexpected happened. At the moment everything went dark, I didn't know I was about to enter the most transformative experience of my life. What happened next is something I can never forget, no matter how hard I try. When the anesthesia took over my body, I felt like I was being enveloped by a heavy mist. The last thing I remember was the sound of the machines around me, and the feeling that everything was under control. But suddenly, everything changed. I felt a jolt. It wasn't physical, but it seemed like something had pulled me out of myself. I opened my eyes, or at least I thought I did, and realized I was floating. But there I was, lying on the operating table, my body motionless, pale, surrounded by panicked doctors. It was at that moment that I understood I was dead. Despair took over me. How could I be dead? I still had so much to do. I'm Sara Taylor, a successful woman, a mother, a wife. It couldn't end like this. I tried to scream, but I had no voice. I tried to touch someone, but my hands went through everything and everyone. The feeling was of absolute helplessness. For a moment, I was paralyzed, unable to think. Then, a thought struck me like lightning. My money can't bring me back. How do I control this? I always controlled everything in my life, and now, the idea that the power I had built over decades was useless in that moment was unbearable. Floating there, watching the scene, was surreal. I saw the doctors running, trying to resuscitate me. I heard words like cardiac arrest, and we're losing her, but it didn't seem real. It was like watching a movie I was no longer a part of. The feeling of being out of my body was strange. I could see everything from a perspective I had never experienced before. Every detail was incredibly clear. The sweat on the doctors' foreheads, the reflection of the lights on the surgical instruments, even the expression of tension on the nurse's face. It was as if I had eyes everywhere at the same time. But as I saw all this, a huge emptiness began to take over me. A voice in my mind screamed, "This can't be happening. I'm strong, I'm powerful, I can solve anything. How do I get out of here?" It was like being trapped in a nightmare, and the only thing I wanted was to wake up. As I floated, I began to feel something I had never felt before: fear. Not the fear of losing a business or failing a project, but a deep, primal fear. It was the fear of no longer existing, of disappearing, and, worse still, of having no control over it. I tried to calm down, but it was impossible. No matter how much I wanted to return to my body, no matter how much I wanted to scream for someone to hear me, nothing worked. I was alone, lost, and for the first time in my life, I realized how insignificant everything I valued so much really was. It was at that moment that something began to change. I felt a lightness in the environment, as if a presence was approaching. It wasn't something I saw, but something I felt. A feeling of warmth, of peace, that began to fill the emptiness around me. And then, before I could understand what was happening, a light appeared in the distance, soft but irresistible. The light that once seemed distant now enveloped everything around me. It was a brightness different from any other I had ever seen. It didn't hurt the eyes, but warmed the heart. And there, in the center of all that light, I saw him. He didn't need an introduction. My heart knew exactly who he was. Jesus. He was there, radiant, with a presence so powerful that, for a moment, all the pain, all the fear, and all the confusion disappeared. I didn't know how, but I felt that he knew everything about me, every thought, every mistake, every achievement, and yet, there was no judgment in his gaze. Only love. My legs, or whatever it was I had at that moment, gave way. I knelt, unable to bear the mixture of peace and regret that took over me. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. All I could do was let the tears flow. Jesus then smiled, and that smile seemed to penetrate my soul. "Sarah," he said, "you thought you had everything, but you forgot the most important thing." I wanted to argue, wanted to say that I never needed anyone, that my life was proof that hard work was enough. But at that moment, I realized the emptiness of all my certainties. Everything I had achieved, everything I considered important, seemed so small before him. "You always sought control, but the time has come to understand that there are things that only I can offer," he continued. "I am the way, the truth, and the life." The weight of his words hit me like an avalanche. There, before Jesus, all my justifications, my rationalizations, my arrogance, crumbled. I finally understood what was missing. And, for the first time, I surrendered. "I accept, Lord," I said, my voice choked. "I accept your love, your truth, and your salvation." Jesus' smile widened, and then, he extended his hand. As I touched it, an indescribable peace enveloped me, as if all the broken pieces inside me had been restored. But what happened next was even more surprising. Suddenly, the environment changed. I was in an indescribably beautiful place. It was as if heaven had opened before me. There were colors I had never seen, a harmony that could not be translated into words. And everywhere, there was a sense of worship and reverence that transcended any earthly experience. Jesus began to speak. As we walked through that heavenly place, he showed me what was reserved for those who remained faithful to him. It was an unimaginable glory, an eternal life of fullness and communion with God. But then, his words took a more serious tone. "Sarah, the world you know is on the brink of great changes," he said. "Many of these changes will seem good, promising progress and ease, but they will be rooted in deception." Then, he showed me something. It was as if I was watching a vision of things that were about to happen. I saw my husband in a meeting room, discussing a project that involved advanced technology, iris scanners, implantable chips, something that seemed so modern and promising. But as the vision continued, I began to see the danger. "They are preparing for something bigger," Jesus said. "A system that will control everything, from finances to people's freedom. Many will accept this without question, but it will be the beginning of something described in my word." I shivered at those words, but Jesus continued. He mentioned a specific passage that resonated deeply within me. "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads." Revelation 13:16. He explained that the project my husband was about to finance was part of something much bigger, something that would fulfill this prophecy. And then, he gave me a mission. "You must warn him, Sarah. You must warn the world. Many will not listen, but you must persevere." I nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility. How could I do this? I, who never got involved in my husband's business, who never cared about what was beyond my comfort bubble. But before I could express my doubts, Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. "I will be with you, Sarah, always. But now, you need to go back." My heart ached. Go back. I wanted to stay there forever, in that perfect place, by his side. But in the distance, I began to hear voices, human voices, calling my name, begging me to come back. I wanted to protest, wanted to say I wasn't ready to go back. But before I could even think of words, Jesus approached me again. He looked directly into my eyes, and somehow, I felt like I was being rebuilt from within. He knew me better than I knew myself, and that was frighteningly comforting. "Before you leave, you need to hear something very important," he said, with a voice so soft and firm that it seemed to resonate not just in my ears, but deep in my soul. I held my breath, feeling that what he was about to say would change everything. "Sarah, you've always lived as if you were in control, but the true control is in my hands. Now, I send you back with a mission." My heart raced. A mission. For a moment, all my fears and insecurities came back full force. How could I accomplish something so great? I, who had always thought only of myself. Jesus continued, "You need to warn people about what is to come. Many of them will be deceived by promises of ease and security, but the price will be too high. Do not let people give up their freedom and their faith for something so fleeting." As he spoke, my mind was filled with images, people in lines, accepting something that seemed practical and harmless, but that, little by little, took away their freedom. They didn't know, but they were being led by a system that distanced them from God. It was then that he mentioned the passage from Revelation that I had heard before, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name." I shivered. This was not just a symbolic or distant vision. It was real, and it was approaching. Jesus continued, "Your husband is about to finance something that will be part of this. He doesn't understand the consequences, but you know now, and it is your responsibility to warn him, even if he doesn't listen to you." I felt small, helpless. How could I, Sara Taylor, convince someone so influential and powerful of something so great? It was then that he leaned in slightly and said something that stayed with me forever. "Don't worry about the size of what I ask of you. Just trust. I don't choose the qualified. I qualify the chosen." Those words were like a balm to my soul. They carried a truth I had never understood before. The strength did not come from me, but from him. Jesus then opened a kind of book, not physical, but something I could see in the air. Inside it, there were living words, pulsating, as if they had a life of their own. He pointed to a passage and said, "Read this when you wake up, and share it with others." The passage was from Matthew 24. "Then shall they deliver you up, to be afflicted, and shall kill you. And they shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise, and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved." Those words echoed within me. I knew they would be challenging, but I also knew they were true. Then, he gave me something that seemed deeper than any instruction, a vision of hope. Jesus showed me people being saved because they heard the message. I saw hardened hearts opening, families restored, and even some of those who had been deceived by the mark, repenting and returning to God. It was then that he said something even more impactful. "You will be rejected, Sarah. Many will laugh at you, doubt you, even attack you. But remember, they are not rejecting you, but me. Just persevere." I wanted to say something, wanted to thank him, wanted to promise that I would do everything he was asking, but the words got stuck. Instead, tears fell from my face, tears of repentance, of acceptance, and of a love I had never experienced before. He placed his hand on my shoulder again and said, "Remember, I will be with you until the end of time." Suddenly, everything around me began to change. The light began to fade, and I felt like I was being pulled back. But before I left, I heard his last words. "Proclaim the truth, save those you can, and trust in me." The transition was abrupt. An invisible force seemed to pull me back, and suddenly, the soft, welcoming light that enveloped me began to dissipate. I felt like I was being compressed, forced to fit back into a space that seemed too small to contain the fullness of what I had just experienced. In a matter of seconds, I was back. I don't know how to explain it, but I knew. The sterile smell of the hospital invaded my nostrils, and a deep heaviness settled over me. My physical body, my eyelids were heavy, and the sharp pain in my chest brought the bitter awareness that I had returned. As I opened my eyes, I noticed the exhausted face of a doctor leaning over me. his voice filled with relief. "She's back. We have a pulse. Keep monitoring." I wanted to speak, wanted to say that I had seen Jesus, that everything I thought was true about life was wrong, but my throat was dry, and weakness kept me silent. As the medical team adjusted the equipment around me, tears streamed down my face, silently, carrying a whirlwind of emotions. Gratitude for being alive, fear of what was to come, and the overwhelming certainty that my life would never be the same. After I was stabilized, my eyes wandered around the room. My husband was sitting in a corner of the room, holding the hand of one of our daughters. His eyes were red from crying, but the relief at seeing me conscious was palpable. "Sara, you scared us so much," he murmured, approaching and holding my hand firmly. I wanted to hug him, say that everything would be okay, but my mind was elsewhere. The images and words of Jesus still echoed within me like a movie that wouldn't stop replaying. I needed to tell them, needed to warn them about what he had shown me, but how could I? How could I tell them that I had been before Jesus, that he had given me a mission so urgent and grand? My husband, so rational and pragmatic, would he believe, and my daughters? Would they see me as crazy? The difficulty of processing it all was devastating. In the following days, as I recovered in the hospital, I struggled against an invisible weight. Every time I tried to gather the courage to share my experience, a voice in my mind whispered, "They won't believe you. They'll ridicule you." One morning, as the sun streamed through the window of the room, my eldest daughter, Clara, approached with a hesitant smile. "Mom, you were so close to dying. Do you remember anything?" Her question hit me like a bolt of lightning. I knew this was the moment, but my throat tightened. How to describe something so grand, so divine, without sounding crazy? Finally, I gathered the courage to murmur, "Clara, I saw Jesus." Her expression changed, not with disbelief, but with curiosity. She waited, and I continued. I told her, with broken words, about the light, the love, the peace, and the mission he had given me. But when I mentioned the warning about the mark, I saw her expression change. She seemed lost between believing and doubting. "Mom, you've been through so much. Maybe it was ... a dream." That word hurt more than any physical pain. A dream, no. I knew what I had seen, knew what I had heard, but at that moment, I realized that convincing others would be a battle as difficult as the mission Jesus had given me. When my husband entered the room, Clara shared what I had told her. He just looked at me with a mix of concern and skepticism. "Sara, you were unconscious for a long time. These things ... can be confusing." But I knew I couldn't give up, even if no one believed me. That night, as the hospital was silent and dark, I closed my eyes and prayed for the first time in my life. "Lord, give me strength. I can't do this alone." The answer didn't come in words, but in a peace that filled me. I remembered what Jesus had said, "Just trust. I will be with you." With that, a new kind of strength began to rise within me. I still didn't know how, but I was determined to fulfill my mission, even if it meant facing disbelief and ridicule. The following days were marked by internal and external challenges. How to explain to my husband that his next investment could be linked to something so dark? How to approach such a delicate subject without seeming paranoid? But one thing was certain. I couldn't keep it to myself. Back home, with my physical support recovered but the spiritual weight still heavy, I prepared to take the next step. I knew I needed to find a way to share my experience with the world, to warn about what was to come. The day I decided to open my heart to my husband was one of the hardest of my life. My stomach churned, my mind repeated Jesus' words, and my heart cried out for courage. He was in his office, reviewing some papers, as usual. I approached with a lump in my throat. "I need to talk to you," I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up, frowning as he saw my serious expression. "Of course, what is it?" I sat down in front of him and held his hands. A shiver ran through me as I did so. I knew that what I was about to say could change everything between us, for better or for worse. "You know that, during the surgery, something happened to me," I began. "I saw ... Jesus. He showed me things about the future, about your next negotiation, something you're about to sign. You need to stop." His eyes, initially calm, narrowed. "Sara, what are you talking about? How do you know about this?" "This negotiation is confidential." My heart raced. I knew there was no way he would believe me without some proof. I relied on the one thing I knew to be true, Jesus' message. It's something about technology. A company that collects biometric data, like the iris. They say it's to make people's lives easier, but it's not just that. In the future, they plan to implant chips in humans, controlling everything: money, work, even the freedom to buy or sell. Jesus showed me this, and he asked me to warn you. He looked at me as if I had gone mad, but then something changed. I saw fear in his eyes. He looked away and was silent for a few moments. This information is confidential. Not even Clara or the girls know about this, he said softly. How could you know? My tears began to flow, but they were not tears of sadness. It was the confirmation that Jesus was with me. I told you, love, Jesus showed me. He gave me a mission, and you are an important part of it. After a long silence, he held my hand more tightly. Sarah, I don't know what to believe, but I know you wouldn't lie to me, and from what you're saying, this company could be involved in something dangerous. He withdrew from the negotiation. That same week, it was an internal battle for him, losing such a lucrative investment in exchange for something that seemed so uncertain, but he trusted me. Later, he sat with me, emotional, and said, Sarah, if Jesus really warned you about this, then I need to know him. I need to understand more. Can you teach me to pray? My transformation became his as well. We prayed together that night, and the man who had always been so skeptical finally opened his heart to Christ. Because of our actions, the company faced difficulties, but without my husband's significant financial backing, they encountered significant delays. Later, we learned that they had been rushing to take advantage of a period of global crisis to try to introduce the data collection devices on a large scale. But this delay allowed more people to be warned. Still, it wasn't the end. Companies around the world began to introduce similar technologies, subtly versatile proposals, innovative systems. Everything seemed so convenient, so harmless. But deep down, I knew this was the beginning of the fulfillment of Jesus' words about the mark. From that moment on, my life became a continuous mission. I began to share my story, even knowing that many would not believe. I wrote, spoke, and even participated in Christian events, warning people about what I saw and heard. The Bible became my daily guide, and Jesus' words gave me strength. I read and reread the passages he showed me, Revelation 13:16-18, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads. This was the message I needed to share. It wasn't just about warning, but about preparing people spiritually, so they would have the strength to resist when the time came. Today, my family lives with a renewed purpose. My husband has become a man of faith, and my daughters, once skeptical, have begun to seek answers. It hasn't been easy, but Jesus never said it would be. He only asked us to trust. And now, I leave the same message for you. Maybe you're hearing this and wondering if it's true, or if it's just a story. But remember what Jesus said, "He that endureth to the end shall be saved." If you've made it this far, I encourage you to seek these answers for yourself. Read the Bible, especially the book of Revelation. Pray, even if it's for the first time. The journey is yours, but Jesus will be there, waiting for you. If you believe this message can help someone, share this video, and let me know in the comments, what would you do if you were in my place?